Hello and welcome back to Everon Railways, where I am bringing Everon to life in miniature. Today's video is all about the House Statek. This video is going to be, it's not going to be a construction video. I'm not going to really show the construction steps, as the construction is very similar to all the other buildings and the process that is used for all the other buildings. For example, this was designed in Google SketchUp. It was printed out, 3D printed at the company known as Shapeways. The prototype was sent to me. A mold was made, several castings were made, and that brings us up to this point. I've got another here where the typical thing is to black out anything that'll be exposed or potentially exposed on the model after the screenshots are applied, and on the roof and so forth. And we'll get into a little detail about specific things of the construction later on. Now, this building, the House Statek, this was when I set out to do this project of modeling Everon, what is it, 4 years ago now. This was the building I started with, and originally I knew nothing about 3D printing, and my original attempt was to model all the buildings out of ABS and styrene, the old-fashioned way. Well, it wasn't this building, but another building gave me problems with the roof lines and roof angles. So I quickly learned how to 3D print, design in 3D print. And after that, it's been a long learning curve to get to that point. But after that, every building had been designed in 3D printed, because it's just so much easier to do that than it is to physically model the old craftsman style way, I guess you could call it. And I did complete this building in ABS and styrene, and here it is. This was built 4 years ago. And this was the House Statek. This was the first building, as I mentioned earlier, that I attempted to build. And I think I did a good job. The rubber band is holding the ends on. There was never a reason to go ahead and attach them, although I very easily could. One thing I didn't notice after I built the model is this tile roof. This tile roof, this is Spanish tile. This is not the European pan. Is it called pan tile? And the or the tile material from Knock that matches the Everon buildings exactly, or pretty close. This is Spanish tile, so that is technically wrong. But this is ABS. I think it's it's Plastruck gray ABS, 3.5 millimeter or 3 point. I forget exactly what the width is, but being that this was the first building that I designed, you might ask, where did I get the measurements from? And what I did to get the measurements is I went into the game's editor, pulled up one of these buildings. These buildings are all added in an add-ons, editor add-ons, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it allows you to pull up all these different structures and place them wherever you want them. So I would place this building, and then I would pull into the editor, or I should say I would place an Abrams tank right next alongside the House Statek. And that would give me basically a proportional comparison, length and height. And I would go research what the dimensions of the Abrams tank is. And from there, that would give me a rough estimate and gave me my measurement benchmark. And once I had the measurements of the House Statek established, I could use this building as a measurement benchmark from which to compare to all the other buildings. For example, in the editor, I would pull up a Kulna or what have you. Let's see, we've got the Stadola here. And very similar to this way is to pull them up and in the game compare, put them side by side, and that will give you an estimate. You can get a pretty good idea of what the other measurements of the other buildings are. And one thing I would do, which worked out very well, was I would go into the multiplayer game and kill myself, and which transforms you in a multiplayer game into that seagull. And that seagull worked out to be a great tool to fly around buildings. And one reason was, if you were to, as a seagull, fly at this height, say you wanted to know what this height was, and then compare it to the other building, the seagull, if the buildings were all on level ground, that seagull, just by flying forward, would fly at the exact same height to the other buildings. So I use that quite a bit to fly around and establish measurements and comparisons. It worked out very well. Here is the mold I use for making the House Statek castings. This is a two-part mold made from Smooth-On's Mold Max 30. And it was made basically with this was in the shape of a PVC pipe. The master was placed down on top of a plastic piece, and the PVC pipe was put over it, and then the mold was poured in. And let's take a look here. I pour in this hole here, and it vents out and comes up to here. And this mold is a good mold. It makes nice thin castings. You know, like for right here, you can see. This is a casting, obviously, and you can see where I clipped off the where the the porthole and the vent holes come out here on the lid. This saves a lot of resin for being a two-part mold, obviously, and not wasting all that resin in a solid casting. It's been a very reliable mold. It's about 1.5 years old now, and it's holding up very good. These are those mold keys I was talking about back in the Stadola build, and how they're supposed to line you up, and they work great. So this piece would slide into this here, and that's that. Okay, here are some casting blanks. There are 25 casting blanks here of the House Statek. And there is a completed House Statek that I will show you in a moment. Now I have a spreadsheet I made that have all the towns on Everon, the 18 towns on Everon, and the different types of buildings that are in each town. So I have a total of 26 House Stateks, at least in a cast form, and I only need to cast 8 more that so that I'll have a total of 34, which is the total amount in all the towns on Everon. Of course, this does not include the House Stateks which reside out in the countryside, and there's quite a few of those too. But will I ever model the 18 towns, all 18 towns? I don't think so. I lack the room, number one, right now to do so. So we'll get on to the completed House Statek. Okay, here is the completed model of the House Statek. Now there are a couple of flaws on this completed model, and I'll address those in a little bit. One thing I noticed from building the House Statek is I figured out why my screenshots were not printing out correctly. And what I found was the culprit, of all things, turned out to be the photo paper. For whatever reason, when that printer prints out on photo paper, it tweaks the saturation levels and changes the hue of the paper, or I'm sorry, of the printing. And I found that if I go back and revert back to printing on regular letter paper, that the colors are more correct. Now on this particular model, I went back and replaced the sides. This is regular printer letter paper, and it has some advantages to being ultra thin, so you don't really see the thickness on the end pieces against the model. And this side here is also letter paper. It prints more accurately, I think. Now these two ends are photo paper. You can see that the colors print out rich, extra rich. And I've read this on other sites too. So I'm not going to be using photo paper like I thought I would. And that's okay because I think letter paper works just as well. I'll just hit it with that matte finish spray. Now, what were the flaws? Well, I forgot to add the little end cap there. That's no problem. You can see one. You can see that end cap right there. One of the tile roof was cut a little short, about a millimeter or so. There's a crease there. I don't know if I can live with that or not. I'll see. What was the other flaw here? Yeah, let's see. So, one other thing about the House Statek model that I did not want to do on any of these models was to do some kind of painting on them. And originally, on these end pieces here, the inside roof facade pieces in here, I originally put a screenshot against those, but it did not look good at all. It looked absolutely fake, and I just couldn't deal with it. I just couldn't get past that. So I did something I thought I wasn't going to do, and I ended up painting these top layers, the top pieces of the ends, sections, and the inside along the roof line there, and the chimneys. The chimneys are also painted, and I don't know if that's coming in focus. I don't think it is. And I think the chimneys are a little lighter than the rest of the building and don't quite match, but they're kind of like that in the game as well. And that's okay. I guess some variety's not too bad. I like the way that the chimneys came out as well as the side. It kind of has either concrete and a very coarse stone texture. And for the roof, I made a roof stencil. It has given me a little bit of problems. I'm not going to go into that here, but I found a way to get around that. You know, the other flaw, what was the other flaw? Oh, there's a little gap right here along that corner where this piece was cut a little bit too short. If you can see that. So I'll work on those. But anyway, here we go. The House Statek is going to be a little bit more labor intensive just because of the painting on each model. And all I did there was, here's an example here. I've got 3 tubes of just old cheap, very cheap craft paint from a hobby store. And for this is the colors I used on the chimney. And just basically went with a light color, dabbed in a few darker gray, and then a little even darker color. And just stippled that onto the chimneys. So we'll finish out the video with a few still shots, and what'll be next? Probably the Kulna. I'll do a Kulna video. That should be 5 minutes long, not very involved there. Thank you for watching Everon Railways.